Hi my dear children, welcome to the class. Today we are going to see a new topic from your 5th standard. So what is your next topic? That is your 8th lesson. Your 8th lesson is about skeletal system. Now let's see about skeletal system. Right. So our body, if you take, you know all the living things are made up of cells, right? So group of cells form together a tissue, right, and group of tissues form together a organ, right, and group of these organs form together an organ system. So our body is made up of many organ system, right. So today we are going to discuss, we are going to learn about the skeletal system. So what is the skeletal system? So skeletal system is a study is about bones and bones in our body, right. So bones and joint, and you are going to learn about the muscles also in this lesson. Right. So now let us see about the skeletal system. Now before that you will be having a doubt, ma'am, why we have to study about the skeletal system, right. So it is a basic for you to in future you can become a physiotherapist. So a physiotherapist is a person, it is a profession where the person study about only the bones, right. So if you or thorough about the skeletal system, even in the future you can become a physiotherapist, or even if you study MBBS, so you can also become a ortho surgeon. So ortho surgeon, you can become ortho surgeon when you are very thorough about the skeletal system, right. So now this is your basic about your skeletal system. So once you are very thorough with the basic, in your future, in your higher studies, it will be easy for you to study in detail about the skeletal system, right. Now we are going to see the outlines of the skeletal system. Now let us see. So the skeletal system is made up of bones, right. So think of your body, when your body does not have bones, how your body will be? Yes, your body will be like this, just like a cloth. So how you have a cloth, how you have a rubber. So likewise our body will not have any shape, or it will not have any structure without the bones. So the bones make our body to look good, right. So to look in shape, right. So now let's first we will see, you can see the skeletal system. So you can see the skeletal system in the human skeletal system is divided into two sections. What are they? So they are known as axial skeleton and then appendicular skeleton. So what is axial skeleton? Axial skeleton is the bones that we are going to study about the inside body. For example, your skull, rib cage, backbone. So these come under axial skeleton. What are the bones which is present inside our body? For example, the inner part of the body. For example, your head, that is your skull, and then chest, that is your rib cage, and your back, that is your backbone, vertebral column. So when these three form together a skeletal system called axial skeleton, right. And appendicular skeleton. Appendicular skeleton is nothing but your arms and your from your hip, that is your legs. So this form, so your arms and the pelvic girdle and the legs. So these form a appendicular skeleton, right. Now let us see. So before that we are going to see the functions of the skeletal system. So why skeletal system is very important for our body, you should know that, right. So without the bones, you know that will not be any shape, right. So the bones help our body to give shape and support. So without the bones we will not have support, our muscles will not have support to do any kind of activities, right. And also the bones help in movement, right. So without the bones we cannot able to move, right. So the bones help our body to move from one place to another place. So if there is no leg bones we cannot move, if there is no hand bones we cannot do any actions, right. So the bones help our body in movement. The bones give the shape and support to our body. Now let us say some more functions. So you can see here the skeletal system protects the internal organs. What are the internal organs? So internal organs are nothing but your brain, heart, lungs, right. So these organs are protected by the skeletal system. So your brain is protected by the skull, your heart and lungs are protected by the rib cage. So, the bones, the skeletal system help in protection, it protects the internal organs, right. And also you can see here the bone, right. So, the bones, inside the bone you can see a bone marrow. When you are eating chicken or a mutton leg or a bone, no, when you bite it, you can see inside one reddish substance which is be present, right, will be tasty also, right. So, that is known as bone marrow, okay. So, you can see the bone marrow, right. So, here only what happens, the blood cells are formed here. So, the bones help in the formation of the blood cells, right. So, not only it gives shape and support, not only it helps in movement, it also protects the internal organs and also it helps in the formation of blood cells in the bone, right. So, now these are all the functions of the skeletal system. Now, let us see in detail about the skeletal system. So, here you can see when a child born, so when a child borns, when the child grows, right, so automatically the bones also will grow, but usually the child will have more than 350 bones, right. And when a child is reaching the adult stage, so the child will not have the child will have more than 350 bones, and when a child is, you can see here, so the child will have 350 bones, more than 350 bones, and when a child is reaching the adult stage, so adult will have 206 bones. So, a child will have 350 bones. So, how many bones for a child? A child will have more than 350 bones. When a child reaches the adult stage, the adult will have 206 bones. 206 bones. So, we can easily say adult will have how many bones? Adult will have 206 bones in our body, right? Right. So, now let us see the next one. So, we are going to learn about this axial skeleton first. So, axial skeleton is nothing but your skull, rib cage and your backbone, that is your vertebral column, right. So, you can see here the skull, right. So, once it is this is the skull, you can see the skull is divided into many small bones, right. So, totally the skull has 22 bones, right. So, here this is known as skull, right. So, the skull has totally 22 bones. How many bones? 22 bones. So, here 8 bones will be in the cranial part. Cranial part means the upper portion of the head. So, the upper portion of the head has 8 bones which is jointed together by a switches, right. So, it is a immovable bones, we cannot move that joints, right. So, totally in the cranium there will be 8 bones, and in the face, so in the face you can see 14 bones. So, totally in the skull there will be 22 bones, right. And you can see the only movable bone in the skull is your lower jaw. So, your upper jaw and lower jaw, both your upper jaw and lower jaw has teeth in it, right. So, this lower jaw, the lower jaw is the only bone which you can move, but other bones you cannot move, right. Okay. So, in the skull the movable bone is your lower jaw. So, lower jaw you can move. So, lower jaw is the movable bone, right. So, this lower jaw help us to eat, help us to speak, right. So, it help us to speak and eat. So, that is why lower jaw can be movable, right. And also this skull protects a very important organ. What it is? Yes, exactly, it protects our brain. Okay, the skull is protected, the brain is protected by the skull, right. So, these are the things about the skull. So, what you learnt about the skull? The skull protects the brain and there are 22 bones in the skull, 8 in the cranium part, 14 in the facial part, and lower jaw is the only bone that we can move in the skull, right. Yes. Now, let us see about the next one, vertebral. So, you can see here, so the skull protects the brain, right. So, even when there is a shock, when there is an accident, so you have, they say, right, when you travel you have to wear helmet. Why? Because to protect your delicate organ, brain is a very delicate organ that needs protection, right. So, your skull protects your brain. So, you even here you can see when there is a sudden vibration or sudden hit, so the skull protects the brain, right. So, next we will see about the rib cage, that is your in the chest part, right. So, rib cage is totally there are 12 pairs, okay. So, there are 12 pairs of rib cage here. So, this is your rib cage. Okay. So, ribs are the very thin and curved bones. You can see the ribs here, there are totally 12 pairs of ribs. So, in the right side there will be 12 and left side there will be 12. So, totally there are 12 pairs of ribs. So, the ribs are the thin and curved bones. So, these are joined together. In the front they are joined together with the sternum and the back it is joined with your backbone, right. So, that is why it forms like a cage. கூண்டு மாதிரியான ஒரு வடிவத்தில் இருக்கிறதுனால it is known as rib cage, okay. So, you can see totally there are 12 pairs of rib cage. The first 7 pairs. So, you can see here in the red, right. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7 pairs they are called as true ribs. Why they are called as true ribs? Because these ribs are jointed in the front, it is jointed with the very flat bone known as sternum. Sternum is the chest bone, chest bone, sternum. Okay. So, in the front the 7 pairs of the ribs are attached to the sternum and at the back side it is attached with the backbone, that is vertebral column. So, that is why these 7 are known as true ribs. They are known as true ribs. Okay. And the next 3 you can see then there will be next 3 pairs. The next 3 pairs they are attached to the 7th rib. Okay. So, you can see this is the 7th rib, right. So, this last the next 3 rib pairs will not be joined to the sternum. அது வந்து sternum ஓட attach ஆயிருக்காது. அது எதோட attach ஆயிருக்கு? இந்த last 7th rib ஓட attach ஆயிருக்கிறதுனால they are known as false rib. Okay. So, the next 3 is known as false ribs. Why? Because they are not attached to the sternum, right. And the next last 2 pairs, there will be last 2 pairs here. So, the last 2 pairs are known as floating ribs, floating ribs. So, why they are called as floating ribs? Because they will not be just attached to the back side or in the front side, they will be just floating as it is, right. So, that is why they are not actually attached. So, that is why they are called as floating ribs, right. So, now what is the function of the rib cage? The rib cage protects the heart and lungs. So, how skull protects the brain, likewise the rib cage protects your heart and the lungs. So, heart and lungs are all the internal organs which needs protection, right. So, that is protected by the rib cage. Okay. Now, let us see about the next one. So, now let us see how the ribs protects, your rib cage protects your heart and the lungs, right. So, now let us see the next one about your vertebral column. So, what is vertebral column? Vertebral column is nothing but your backbone, right. So, you can see here, so at the back of our body, right, we can see this vertebral column. So there will be nearly 33 vertebrae, small bones called vertebrae. That vertebrae are jointed together and forms the vertebral column. So totally from the neck you can see the vertebral column. This vertebral column in the top it is attached with the skull. The skull from the skull the vertebral column continues, right. So in the top it is attached with the skull, right. So how many vertebrae are there? So this is known as vertebral column. So this vertebral column is also known as backbone. So this is also known as backbone, right. So how many vertebrae will be there? There are 33 vertebrae. So small bones known as vertebrae, that vertebrae form together and form the vertebral column. So totally if we count there will be 33 vertebrae, right. Now let us see what is the function of the vertebral column. This vertebral column protects the spinal cord. Protects the spinal cord. So you can see there will be a hole in the vertebrae, and in that hole you can see the bundle of nerves, that is known as spinal cord. So the spinal cord is present in the vertebral column, and this vertebral column protects the spinal cord, right. Yes. So in this class you learned what is the function of the vertebral columns. So from the brain the spinal cord is connected, and from the skull the vertebral column is connected, and you can see the vertebral column protects the spinal cord. Spinal cord is nothing but the bunch of nerves that continues from the brain, right. Yes. So next we are going to see about the appendicular skeleton. So you learned about the axial skeleton. Now we are going to see about the appendicular. So what is appendicular skeleton? That is your arms and your legs. So you can see these are known as limbs. So these are known as limbs. Okay. So this is your forelimb. This is your forelimb and this is your hind limb, right. So first we will see about the forelimb. So in the forelimb you can see here there will be two type of bones here, okay. So there will be the upper arm and there will be a lower arm, okay. So you can see the hand, that is your forearm, that is your forelimb. So there will be two bones. So the upper arm will be longer and it will be thicker, okay. But in the lower arm you can see two bones are present, okay, right. So this is your upper arm. So the upper arm will be long, right, and there will be two bones in the lower arm. Right, and now this arm is connected to the backbone. How it is connected with your backbone? With the help of the shoulder girdle, right. So with the help of the shoulder girdle, the forelimb, that is the upper arm, is connected to the vertebral column, right. Next we are going to see about the hind limb, that is your lower legs, okay. So now we are going to see about the legs, right. So in the legs also we can see there are two set of bones will be there, right. So that is the upper leg and the lower leg, right. So the upper leg will be longer and thicker than the lower leg, right. So this is your upper leg. So this is the upper part of your leg and this is the lower part of the leg. So, this upper part will be longer and thicker, right. So, that is why this is also known as thigh bone. It is known as thigh bone, and it also has a name called femur, F-E-M-U-R. So, femur is the longest bone present in our body, right. So, femur is the longest bone. You can see the thigh bone is the longest bone in our body, and you can see in the lower leg there will be two bones. How in our lower arm we have two bones, the same way in our lower leg also there will be two bones. So, you can see one bone and two bone, right, and also we can see so many bones will be present in our wrist, fingers, and in the feet also. We can see many bones are present in the wrist, feet and all, right. So, this is about your lower legs, okay. So, now you can see here, so the legs are connected to our backbone by a girdle called pelvic girdle, P-E-L-V-I-C-G-I-R-D-L-E. So, the upper limbs, that is the forelimbs, are connected to our backbone by a shoulder girdle. The same way our lower limbs, that is our hind limbs, are connected to our backbone, that is end of our backbone, the down of our backbone by a girdle called pelvic girdle. So, this is the pelvis, right. So, by seeing the pelvis only they can easily identify by seeing the skeleton we can easily identify whether the skeleton is a male or female. How means with the help of the pelvis only, okay. So, the pelvis is nothing but hip bone, okay. If the hip bone is very broader, it means that skeleton is a female skeleton, and if the hip is very shorter, if it is not broader, if they will say it is a male skeleton, right. Yes, right. So, today in this class you learned very informative informations about the skeletal system, right. So, first we learnt that skeletal system is made up of two sets of things, axial and appendicular. So, in the axial we learnt about skull. So, how many bones are there in the skull? So, skull has 22 bones, and skull protects the brain, right. So, that we saw, and the next we saw about the rib cage. So, there are 12 pairs of ribs. So, ribs are the bones that protects the heart and lungs, Then we saw about vertebral column, that they are also called as, yes, of course, backbone. So, vertebral column. So, there are how many vertebrae are there? 33 vertebrae. What is protected by the vertebral column? Yes, very good, spinal cord. So, spinal cord is protected by the vertebral column, right. And we learnt about the limbs also. So, we have two limbs, upper limb and lower limbs, that is forelimb and hind limbs, right. So, our upper limbs, it is very longer, the upper arm is longer, and even the upper leg is longer, right. And in the lower arm and in the lower leg it has two bones, and there are so many bones are present in the wrist, fingers and in the feet, right. Yes, and which is the longest bone in our body? The longest bone is the femur, right. And which is the shortest bone? The shortest bone is, so the shortest bone in our body is stapes, S-T-A-P-E-S. So, this stapes, or it is also called as stirrup, which is present inside our ears. So, this is the smallest bone, and which is the longest bone? The longest bone is femur. Femur is the longest bone, right. So, this is what in this class you have learned, right. So, go through the chapter again and again, so that the hard words will be repeatedly, if you write and see, it will be easy for you to write when you write a test. Okay. So, almost. So, in this class we have learnt about the skeletal system. So, what is the function of the skeletal system, right? So, the main function of the skeletal systems are, it helps in movement, it helps in giving shape and support, and it protects our internal organs, and also it helps in the formation of blood cells in our bone, in our body, right. So, these are the functions of the skeletal system. So, without the skeleton we cannot able to do any kind of physical activities, right. So, in the next class we will discuss about the joints and what are the types of joints and about the muscles, right. So, hope this class is very useful for you. So, go through the video again and again, and in the below description you can see the Google Drive link. Click that and get the study material, copy the study material in your science subject note, right, and do the self assessment. So, by doing the self assessment you will come to know how far you have understood the chapter, right. Thank you children for watching. Have a good day.